Right, welcome back. And to highlight the issue or to discuss the issue, we have with us over the phone Mr. Khaled, Managing Director for Synergy's Center for Strategic Studies. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon to you. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much for being with us. And France is bracing tomorrow for this showdown between Le Pen and Macron. These presidential elections. First, let me take from you, how do, or what is the difference between the centrist President Emmanuel Macron and the far-right challenger Marine Le Pen? How they differ from global issues? Hello. Hello? Hello? Right, so I guess that we are seeing today a kind of silence to the French elections. Macron is the favorite to win according to analysis or data that are collected by French media in the run-off ballots that would be on Sunday, and there are indications he bolstered his advantage with a combative performance in the one-off election debate against somewhat defensive Le Pen. The French president and his allies have insisted over last week that nothing is in the bag, with a strong turnout crucial to avoid a shock in France comparable to the 2016 polls of Donald Trump in the United States. Le Pen's victory would also send shockwaves across Europe. Left-wing EU leaders, including German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, have pleaded with France to choose Macron over his rival. This is how the EU is seeing the situation, or some of the EUs are seeing the situation. I guess we have with us again Mr. Khaled, Managing Director for Synergy's Centers for Strategic Studies. Mr. Khaled. Hello? Mr. Khaled?
Yes, hi, I'm back again. Thank you.
Good to have you again. So I was asking about the difference between the centrist president, Emmanuel Macron, and the far-right challenger, Marine Le Pen, and the difference between both of them to global issues and the Middle East in particular.
Yes. Well, actually, the difference is quite significant. We can see, and that's why we're seeing a lot of sparks of European worries and global leaders and a lot of international institutions that are really interested in this France election. To highlight this, number one, we need to understand that France is the only European country that is a veto. That is holder of a veto state in the UN Security Council. So that gives a very significant edge to France to push forward Europe's agenda. Now, Macron, we've seen that he's more on the centrist side, whereas Le Pen is more on the far right side. With Le Pen, we're seeing increased global worry, or European worry, that she is not pro the EU very much. She might actually deprioritize certain issues such as climate change, such as global partnerships, NATO representation of France, etc. Whereas Macron is more pushing towards more of a global partnerships approach. One of the main concerns is for Europe right now is Le Pen's state is her state with Russia, because we've seen that she has been more pro-Russia, which is worrisome for the European leaders right now. She has even her party is mostly banked and mostly accepting loans from banks with ties to Russia. So that is of course a worrisome state for the Europe right now. So in general, we can definitely say that Macron is more towards pro-partnerships on a global stage, and he's furthering France's alliance through the partnerships existing, through EU, through NATO, through the US alliance. However, Le Pen is more of a pro-nationalist agenda. She is pro a strong nation of France, and not a strong nation within the EU in general. So that's more or less the core differences that we're seeing right now.
Now, if we speak about Macron and Le Pen, as for the Middle East, because we are here in the Middle East, we don't know exactly how will that be different for the Middle East or the regional causes and African causes as well. How do you view how Macron and Le Pen spoke about their perspectives towards the Arab and the African causes so far?
Okay, well, the first impact that we can see on the Middle East is with Macron, he's trying to curb a little bit the effects of the rising Islamophobia, right? Whereas Le Pen is only going to fuel this divide further and further. So her states or her views on Islam have been very clear. Her views on the hijab have been also very clear. She has called it the Islamic uniform right now as well. Her views on immigration are quite certain as well. So that is the first impact. We're going to be seeing more of a more fueling of the hatred speech, of the anti-Islamist hatred speech rising more in a very drastic manner as well in France with Le Pen, rather than Macron, who is also clear on immigration, and he's quite the hardliner on immigration, but he's not as extreme in his views as Le Pen has been. So that is the first effect that we're seeing as well. Now, naturally, also being pro-nationalist as well, Le Pen would have less interest in striking and furthering new partnerships with the Middle East. So I'm guessing that the Middle East will have more of a positive outcome if the situation remains the same, of more of a centrist government in France. Pushing back from the EU might have very strong ripple effects on the entirety of Europe. So if we see Le Pen winning and the EU will start to see a very strong setback that will hinder its policies, that will hinder and potentially even threaten the entire existence of the EU, which will of course have a very, very significant impact on the Middle East. However, also looking at a far-right government in France, the US will start targeting the Middle East more for partnerships and for allies to further stability that is lost in Europe, and as a result, that will start alienating sort of the US there.
If we see what, or during the campaigns of the French president or right now the candidate Emmanuel Macron and Le Pen, if we see their statements during their campaigns and how they view very particular issues that are ongoing worldwide. For an instance, how they view how to deal with the Russian-Ukraine issue, how Marine Le Pen saw the issue, how Macron have seen the issue, and how would their opinion, or who would win? Would that reflect on the policies of France? Because we are seeing for the first time, for an instant, a French president to win the re-election in 2 decades. This is the first time in 2 decades. And on the other side, we are seeing Le Pen would become the first far-right president to lead. Plus, she is, of course, the first, she would be the first female president. So from your point of view, from the campaigns that we have seen and followed during the past period, how far do you think the views of both candidates would reflect on the situation worldwide?
Well, it would definitely, as you've very correctly highlighted, would definitely reflect very significantly on global issues. It's not an easy task to win the re-election, even though Macron is still the favorite right now. But we are seeing that in combination, over 50% of voters in France are anti-system or anti-establishment. They've lost their trust and their faith in the French government, and that's why they're seeking a change. So the situation in Russia, of course, and in the Ukraine is a drastically different viewpoint. On the one side, Marine Le Pen has argued that she wants to work with Russia instead of alienating Russia to prevent a Russian-Chinese axis from rising. On the other hand, Macron has been working with NATO, working with the NATO allies, and working against Russia to hinder his support. We've also seen something that has not been present before in French elections, which is an increasingly rising use of misinformation. So we've seen a lot of doctored tweets and social media presence for both candidates. So that is something that we haven't seen before in the French election. We've seen that in Brazil, we've seen that in Hungary, we've seen that in areas where pro-nationalist candidates have been on the rise. So that is, of course, something else to take note of. Now, if we take this in context, this would be extremely worrisome for a country like Poland, for example, which, after the situation in Ukraine right now, shares an almost 1,200-kilometer long border with Russian-controlled territories. So that would be a very worrisome situation for us. We also take this in account with the rise of with the Hungarian elections, where some scholars have suggested that this might be a rise of sort of an Axis force right now if Le Pen wins the French election. So that is something else that we also need to take note of. So as you've said, there are very significant challenges to this on a global stage. There are with Le Pen also controlling a veto vote. That could hinder a lot of U.S. politics, and that would very much strike a shift in current geopolitical dynamics as well on the global stage.
Here in the Middle East, we're kind of having some issues, or we need to understand more about how to prepare for this upcoming stage. Now, we have dealt with Macron so far for the past for the past years of his being president of France, and really good relations developed between Macron and the Middle East. He is aware of the situation. Le Pen has stated several times, and even that was recalled by Macron himself when he said that she was trying to mask an authoritarian extreme right platform that stigmatized Muslims with a plan to outlaw headscarves in public, for an instant. And we have heard some of the not easy statements. So how should we be preparing for this upcoming stage in both cases?
That is a very good question, actually. I would suggest that in view of the current trends in geopolitics, there is one concrete thing that the Middle East can start to do, which is actually start to decrease the conflict within the Middle East and start bonding together, start formulating one coherent platform of politics. So reactivate the role of the League of Arab States, or find a different mechanism for that as well. However, a unified front of the Middle East has to be presented. We need to stop being reactive to global geopolitics and start actually influencing global geopolitics and start formulating a strong conglomerate front on geopolitics. That is one thing that we definitely need to start doing in the Middle East, as this is the only shield that will further our agenda in the Middle East and provide stability for the Middle East. Because otherwise, we keep on maintaining this reactive attitude towards the different elections happening in different countries, and we're seeing more and more of a rise of nationalistic trends, which will definitely decrease partnerships with the Middle East on the long term as well.
Right. We're seeing here a real show down between both candidates. But here we have to say that polls have already shown Macron with a lead of some 10 percentage points, and that the result is predicted to be closer than those in 2017. Here, when we see the situation here, we find that they are tete-a-tete as we can see, and that there is a very marginal lead for Macron. However, the far-left leader Jean-Luc Mélenchon, who scored this third place, he refused to allow Macron as an easy ride by pointedly telling his followers to elect or to back the French president, and at the same time he insisted that they must not cost even a single vote for Le Pen. So how do you view the situation here? What are we expecting?
As you said, it's definitely not an easy ride for Macron. Now, for the first time in quite some time, the far right and far left in France actually share a little bit of common ground. So that is what is worrisome for the centrist movement, or for Macron in this election. So there are several viewpoints that are shared between Le Pen supporters and between Mélenchon supporters as well. So the question is now these 22% of votes that were cast for the far left, where are they going to go? If they are they going to abstain? I do not believe that France has this widespread culture of abstaining from voting. So they are. We can predict that at least 60% of their votes will be cast. Now, whether they will be cast towards a centrist government or towards a more of a far-right government, that is the question that a lot of people are anticipating right now. However, the far-right has never had such a progress as as with Le Pen right now. And she is definitely putting everything that she has behind this, because also not to forget, this is her third attempt at running for presidency.
Yes.
And back in 2017, it was quite a close call as well. So, so we're seeing this more of a narrative that is forming, that Macron's economic or internal management of domestic politics hasn't been the best for rural France as well. So his politics have furthered the elitists of France, have furthered the rich, and have not been doing so much for the for the average French man. That is the narrative that is being formulated, which is more of a narrative that is closer to the far left and far right, or has more in common with the far left and far right, rather than
Mr. Khaled.
them with his.
Yes, I guess we have to end up our call right now, because my time is out. But Mr. Khaled Said, Managing Director for Synergies Center for Strategic Studies, we thank you so much for your input here for the